Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, including the last of them all, the Blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. As I greet you with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, a greeting of peace from Ilford in London. On this, the 25th day, oh no, this is for me in Trinidad. You in London will be different. For me in Trinidad, it'll be the 25th day of the month of Rajab. For you it's different, yeah. And we begin with this dua. This has come from our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him. Allahumma barik lana fi Rajabin wa Shaban wa baligna Ramadan. Allah kindly grant us blessings in Rajab, the month of Rajab, and the month of Shaban, and grant that we might live to reach blessed Ramadan, inshaAllah. Our topic today is one of supreme importance, the Qur'an and inflation. And of course we will have to define what is inflation, and to do that properly we also have to define what is money in Islam, what is money in the Qur'an. And at the end of the lecture we're going to have to respond. How should we respond to inflation? And I hope I have an audience today here in London who is prepared to talk and to offer your views. And when you offer your views, the whole world would be listening, because the lecture will go on the internet and people from many parts of the world would be listening. And you might be able to offer a view on the subject from which I also would benefit. But before we begin our topic on the Qur'an and inflation, let us thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one God, for helping me to arrive in London, to arrive in England on this. It could be the last time that I travel. The war in Ukraine, of course, has reached a stage now where people who support this side or that side are in danger. And I was not certain whether I'd be allowed into Britain, but I had no problems, alhamdulillah. And I also want to thank, and they will be listening in other parts of the world, those who have helped me with my travel expenses, because the price of tickets is going up, the price of hotel rooms is going up, and so on. And those who have assisted me, may Allah bless them. I also want to thank my student Hisham. It's the first time he's organized a lecture. In the past we had others who did the organization, and may Allah bless Hisham. This is the first lecture of a tour which will last for many months. I leave London on the day of Jummah, which is Friday, for Edinburgh, and there we'll have a lecture that evening on such an important topic. The subject is Khidr alayhi salam, and the new model of scholarship, Islamic scholarship in Akhir Zaman. We have to ask the question, why? why has Islamic scholarship failed in such a significant way at this time? What is wrong? Why is the Darul Uloom no longer producing the scholars who can understand the reality of the world today and who have the capacity to go to the Qur'an, to locate that with which to respond to the awesome challenges of the world today? So that is the topic in Edinburgh, and then I go to Glasgow and we grapple with this topic, an Islamic eschatological analysis. Eschatology, the study of the end time, of the origin and destiny of modern Western civilization. If it is Islamic, we have to go to the Qur'an. What does the Qur'an say about modern Western civilization, about its origin and destiny? And why is it that we don't have scholars of Islam who are doing this? What's wrong? And then I leave Glasgow to go to Inverness, the masjid in Inverness. I think the topic is on money and Islam, similar to today's lecture. And then from Inverness I'll go to Manchester, and I'm going to spend 2 weeks in Manchester. We're trying now to organize lectures in and around Manchester before I leave to go down to Birmingham. And in Birmingham we take up Ukraine, an Islamic analysis of the Russia-Ukraine war. I am not a military analyst, so I'm not going to offer something I don't have knowledge about. But I'm going to offer an Islamic eschatological analysis of the Russia-Ukraine war in Birmingham. And then I want to come back to London in time for Ramadan, so you and I can go and look for the moon. Unless, of course, you're one of those very strange people who live in London, but your moon is in Saudi Arabia. Very strange. They're living in Britain and the moon is in Morocco. Very strange, yes. So we spend 1 week in London here at the beginning of Ramadan, and I get a chance to have iftar with you and so on before I go elsewhere in Britain for Ramadan, and then I remain until the day of Eid. And the day after Eid I fly to Armenia. And the 24th of April is the big day of Armenia because it commemorates the genocide, when a people who had lost all contact with the Qur'an, they had lost it, committed this atrocious genocide of the Christian people of Armenia. More than probably 1.5 million Christians were killed by Muslims who had lost contact with truth. That looks like my phone. We have to turn it off. Turn it off, yeah. And from Armenia I'll go to Brussels and then to Rotterdam. We have a good program in Rotterdam, and then to The Hague and Amsterdam and Frankfurt, and then to Malaysia, and then I'll come back to Macedonia and to Albania, and then come back to Britain, and it's going to take about 7 months. So may Allah give me the strength to be able to do all of this traveling. It might be the last time that I travel. So now let's turn to the Qur'an and inflation. And I think you are probably already aware of the definition of inflation. In a free and a fair market, prices rise and prices fall based on demand and supply. When the demand increases and the supply is not enough for the demand, the price goes up. When the supply increases more than the demand, the price goes down. This is a free and a fair market. But when prices are only going up and up and up, not up and down, then that is inflation. And it didn't come to the world for the first time with the modern Western world. We used to have gold and silver coins as money. And then the king or the Raja or the government will then try to stretch the money. How can you stretch the money? Number one, you can stretch the money by diluting the amount of gold in the coin, introducing alloys into it. And as people begin to realize, because the weight is changing, then the money is losing value and the prices will rise. The other way was you chip the coin. So the weight of the coin becomes less. And not every transaction is one in which you'll be able to go and weigh the weight of a coin. By the time you finish the transaction, you've been ripped off. The gold coin has a little less gold it's supposed to have. So these were the ways in which inflation took place in the past, because of the corruption of the money, either through diluting the gold in the money, the silver, or by chipping the coins, making it less in weight. And prices will then keep on rising because the money was being corrupted. But the present inflation that we now have in the world, around the world, has come not because of the corruption of money as it was done in the past, but because of a different kind of corruption of money. And in order for us to explain that this is a corruption of money that we now have as money, we have to turn to the Qur'an as our primary source of knowledge. And the Qur'an declares of itself, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإنه لحق اليقين, that this book has absolute truth. Once you recognize it as the word of Allah, then whether you understand it or you don't, whether you are comfortable with it or you are not, you have to bow down and submit to it. There are some today who have difficulties because the Qur'an declares plain and clear. Of course, the Pakistan National Assembly doesn't know it. The Qur'an declares plain and clear as daylight, there are only two genders, the male and the female. That's all. So those who are pursuing an agenda of a third gender would find it a little bit uncomfortable to respond to the Qur'an. But the proper, if you are a Muslim, is once you accept that this Qur'an is the word of the one God, then whether you understand it or you don't, whether you're comfortable with it or you are not, this head must bow in submission. Otherwise, you're in trouble. You're not a Muslim if your head does not bow in submission to the Qur'an, meaning you accept the Qur'an to be absolute truth. And so when we turn to the Qur'an now for a definition of money, and we can't deliver a whole lecture on this subject. I have been lecturing on this subject maybe 25 years now, and I have failed. 25 years of effort, and I have failed miserably in convincing my peers, the scholars of Islam, of my view. The surah of the Qur'an, which is the surah par excellence of the end time, is, which you know, Surah Al-Kahf. And it is the surah that you recite for protection for Dajjal. And it is surah which introduces the subject of Gog and Magog. And it is a surah which has money in it. That the young man stood up in a state of defiance of a godless world. They were not scared for their job or their green card or their legal status in Britain or their business and so on. That didn't count for them. They had hearts which were pure. And the heart was in submission to Allah. And the supreme loyalty was to Allah. Not to your job, not to your business, not to the government. And so they proclaimed the truth in that godless age. And of course they had to flee, like our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, had to flee. When you stand up for the truth, you're going to have to flee. When you stand up for the truth, you're going to have to flee. But of course there are those whose hearts are corrupted. They don't want to leave. So they prefer to betray the truth so they can continue to remain. These young men fled and they stopped at a cave. And remember, they had a dog with them? So a dog has a very important role to play in the end time. And Allah put them to sleep for 300 years. But at the end of 300 years, when they questioned each other, they did not know. Some of them said, we've been here for a day or a part of a day. So they did not know they had stayed in the cave for 300 years. But if you've been sleeping for 300 years, when you wake up, you're going to be hungry. So they sent one of them to go and buy some food and take this money with you. The Qur'an uses the word warik. It's not used anywhere else, warik. And we're not going to deal with the meaning of the word, but the significance is money. Because they're going to use this to buy the food. Therefore it has to be money. What is important about this reference to money in Surah Al-Kahf is that after 300 years, the money still stored its value. Money has three functions. The first is to function as a medium of exchange for buying and selling. The second It's the function as a measure of value. What is the cost of a haircut? What is the cost of 1 kilogram of tomatoes? A measure of value. But money has a third function as well. And it is to this third and most important of all functions that Surah Al-Kahf has directed attention. And that is, money must function as a store of value. That if I work for a whole month and I get my salary, and with this salary I can buy a camel. If I put the salary away, lock it up, and take it out again after 5 years, when I go to the market and I find that I can't buy a camel anymore, I can only buy a donkey, then this money has failed as a store of value. And then 5 years later, when I take it out and I go to the market, I can't buy a donkey anymore. I could only buy a goat. Something is wrong with this money. It's failing as money. And then if I'm in Indonesia or in Pakistan, 5 years later, when I go to the market, I can't buy a goat anymore. I can only buy murgi, chicken. Where has the money gone? I could buy a camel, and now I can only buy a chicken. And I'm getting the same salary, but the money is losing value all the time. So this money has failed as a store of value. And Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an, for those who care about studying the Qur'an, for those who care, Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an has directed attention to the role of money as a store of value, because after 300 years, that money could still buy the food. When I was a child, I was 5 years of age, and my father was a school principal. And he then decided to buy a motor car to take me to school. But in addition to that, he started taking me to the market on Saturdays. And I will be there with my little basket, 5 years of age, running along with my father. This is 1947. I saw my father buy 100 oranges for $1. In those days, we were very sensible people. We didn't have plastic bags. Very sensible people at that time. The bags were made of jute. So 100 oranges for $1. Now that I'm past 80, I go to the same market, and with $1 I cannot buy even one orange. So if we fail to recognize that the money that we are using is not storing value, it does not qualify as money, we have only ourselves to blame for being a people who either cannot think or don't have the courage to think, because they know the consequences if they think. So here is the introduction from the Qur'an, that money, in order to qualify as money, must function as a store of value. So if I had the money to buy a sheep in the time of the Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, and provided that demand and supply were to remain the same as at that time, I should be able to buy the same sheep today with the same money in a free and a fair market. Meaning, a free and a fair market would be a market which is using valid money. And then we turn to Surah Al-Baqarah of the Qur'an. And, excuse me, Banu Israel are asking their prophet to pray to Allah to appoint a king. The prophet's name is not mentioned in the Qur'an, but it's from their scriptures, it's Samuel. And when Samuel appointed Saul, as the king, they had objections. We are more qualified to rule than him. He does not even have this much of weight of wealth. Today we speak of a kilogram, but in the Quran it's called a sa'a. He does not have even a sa'a of wealth, meaning of money. This is Surah Al-Baqarah. And so now the Quran is telling us that money, in addition to storing value, money must also have weight. That you can weigh the money. And therefore, in a free and a fair market, you will always have offices in the market where money can be weighed. The gold coin has a certain density, and therefore it has a certain specific weight. And you have the means in the market. The Ottoman Empire had this. Amongst the good things that the Ottoman Empire did, it was the last free and fair market that mankind had before modern Western civilization corrupted the market, was the market in the Ottoman Empire, in which there were checks to ensure that the weight of money was correct and the purity of money was correct. And we then have a second reference to money in Surah Al-Kahf. I wish I had the time to question you, but we don't have the time. That this believer was dying and he's leaving behind orphan children. And it was such a terrible state, he couldn't find anyone with whom he could leave the inheritance for his children, someone who was trustworthy. So what did he do? Excuse me. He dug a hole and he buried the money. And then he built a wall. You know the story. You're not shaking your heads. Not everybody shaking their heads. Huh? You're not studying Surah Al-Kahf. I have a book at the back there entitled Surah Al-Kahf in the Modern Age. So he buried the money and prayed to Allah to preserve this money until his children would grow up. If your child is now 3-4 years of age and you have to wait 15-20 years, you have to bury money which can survive underneath there for 15-20 years, or not rotten. would not decay. The only kind of money which can survive under the earth for 15, 20 years would be metallic money. If I'm wrong, correct me. Metallic money. So gold and silver coins. And this is in Surah Al-Kahf. Then the Qur'an itself makes mention of a gold coin named a dinar. It's there in the Qur'an. That's in Surah to Ali Imran. I'm not going to quote the verse for you. You can check it out yourself. But the word dinar is located in the Qur'an. And it's a gold coin. And the Qur'an also has the word dirham as a silver coin. It's there in the Qur'an. We now come to a very famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, with which I can conclude my definition of money in Islam. And in this hadith, he is defining riba, one form of riba. And he expands the definition of money from the Quran to meet the demands of a market where there may be a shortage of gold and silver coins. What do you do? And here's the hadith. He said, gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, salt for salt. He mentioned 6 things. Now then, let me explain this. He says 6 things. Like for like, it must be equal for equal and hand to hand. Otherwise, it would be riba. This is the hadith. But you will need to get, an explanation. What our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, is speaking about is a transaction which involves an exchange of gold for gold, or silver for silver, or wheat for wheat, or barley for barley, or dates for dates, or salt for salt. Let me give you an example. You probably already know this example, some of you. Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu came to the Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, one day and offered him some dates. The Prophet looked at the dates, he says, Bilal, these are very high quality dates. Where did you get them? Bilal said, O Messenger of Allah, I had, let's use modern weight measures, I had 2 kilograms of inferior quality dates, and I exchanged them for this 1 kilogram of superior quality dates. So here's a transaction of dates for dates. The Prophet said, Bilal, this is the essence of riba. And you know riba. It is such a terrible thing that the very last revelation to come down in the Qur'an, revelations are coming since the time of Adam alayhi salam, for thousands of years, and now this is the Qur'an, this is the last book. And this Qur'an is coming down for 23 years, and now this is the last word to come down. And in the very last words come down in the Qur'an, Allah declares war on the moneylender. War on this form of riba, the moneylender, lending money on interest. And our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, he cursed. He cursed all four. And he said they're all equally guilty. The one who takes riba, the moneylender. The one who gives the riba, you borrow the money on interest for whatever it is, and you're now paying the interest. The Prophet cursed you. The one who records the transaction, you're working with a bank, and the two witnesses of the transaction, he said they're all equally guilty. And I can go on with this subject of how terrible is the sin of riba. Bilal, this is the essence of riba. What? An exchange of dates for dates, which was unequal. This side was 2 kilograms and this side was 1. Bilal, what you should have done was to sell your 2 kilograms of inferior quality dates and take that money and buy the 1 kilogram of superior quality. That would be halal. But if you have an exchange of dates for dates and it is unequal, that's riba. So here's the hadith. Gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, salt for salt. 2 of them are precious metals and the rest, the 4 are commodities of food consumption that you can't do without. And he said, if it is like for like, it has to be equal for equal and hand to hand, meaning it cannot be a credit transaction. Hand to hand means cash, not credit. What has happened in this hadith is that the definition of money is expanded now. That money is no longer gold and silver coins. But if there is a shortage of money in the market, then you are allowed to use commodities of food consumption. If the government has come and banned the use of gold and silver, as the United States did in 1933, they banned it, then you can avoid that gold and silver by turning to these. They can't ban wheat, they can't ban rice. They look stupid, okay? They can't ban salt. They look stupid. So commodities of food consumption, which cannot be made illegal, can't ban it. He mentioned wheat and barley and dates and salt. And in Medina, because there was an abundance of dates in the market, so when there was a shortage of gold and silver coins in the market, they would use dates as money. So now, what is common to all 6 is that they were all used as money. This simple explanation, you cannot get any Darul Uloom to give you this simple explanation. That what is common to all 6 is that they're all used as money. Secondly, that they qualified as money provided that there was an abundant supply in the market. And finally, they could be used as money provided they had a shelf life. You can't use mangoes as money. Why? Mangoes don't have a shelf life. They get rotten. You can't use animals as money. The animal can fall ill, can die. And so now we have a definition of money from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. That money in Islam always has intrinsic value. The value of the money is created by Allah. Is there anyone who differs with me? This is critically important for us to move forward. The definition of money from the Qur'an and Sunnah is that money in Islam always has intrinsic value, meaning the value of the money is in the money. External forces cannot change the value of the money from outside. To change the value of the money, they have to come with guns and physically take away the money from us. Otherwise, we have our money and our money retains its value. It has intrinsic value. So now we turn from the definition of money in the Qur'an to the corruption of money in the modern age. It's not only money which was corrupted. The political system was corrupted. Politicians don't worship Allah anymore. No. Politicians worship a God called electoral success in elections. The supreme loyalty of a politician is no longer to Allah, it's to his party. That's it. And if a politician once famously said, politics has its own morality. Yes, because the morals of a politician constantly change to suit the political climate. So they've corrupted politics, they've corrupted the market today, they've corrupted the economy today. We don't have the time today to deal with the banking system. They've corrupted the educational system. Yes. Who wants a Pakistani degree? Huh? A degree from a Pakistan university has no value. You have to get a British degree or an American degree. Well, Imran Hosein proudly proclaims, I got my degree from Karachi University. And when I joined the Institute of International Relations, the government of Trinidad and Tobago said, we'd like to have you in the foreign ministry, but we want you to go back and do international relations. And the Swiss government had taken the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Switzerland, in Geneva, to establish a branch in Trinidad. And they ran it until we took it over. And to get into this institute, you have to be a university graduate. And they sent me to attend this institute, and all my students in the class are all diplomats from this ministry, this foreign ministry, that foreign ministry, and they were graduates from British universities and American universities and Canadian universities and French universities and the University of the West Indies, and just poor Imran, a Pakistan degree. I mention this again and again, just to shake up those foolish people who believe a Pakistani degree is worth nothing. Shake them up. Well, when the class started, from the first day of the class, it immediately became clear I had something they didn't have. I had something they didn't have. What was it that I had? I had the Qur'an. I had a teacher who taught me how to study the Qur'an. And I had great teachers in Pakistan. And at the end of the year, I came first in their class. In the exam of international economics, I defeated the fellow who had a master's degree from the London School of Economics. Corruption of education today. Corruption of the political system today. Corruption of the market today. Corruption of the world outside there. Yesterday, We used to jump in the river to bathe. We used to drink the water from the river. Who drinks river water today? You see a sign, dangerous for diving, dangerous for swimming, dangerous for fishing. Every river is now corrupted. So it's no surprise that money should also be corrupted. And what is the explanation for this universal corruption? The Qur'an says that it's been sent to explain all things. It says so in Surah An-Nahl, that this Qur'an has come as Tibyanan likulli shay, that this Qur'an has come to explain all things. So if there's universal corruption in the world today, everywhere you turn, it's corrupted. The male-female relationship is corrupted. The bedroom life is corrupted. Where is the explanation of this universal corruption? Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an directs attention. This is the surah par excellence of Akhir Zaman, of the end time. Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. But Gog and Magog are the ones responsible for universal corruption on earth. But my peers, with inexplicable obstinacy, the scholars of Islam refuse to study the subject of Gog and Magog from the Qur'an. They refuse to do it. No. The hadith says that Gog and Magog will be released only after Jesus returns. So we're not talking about that now. He hasn't come back as yet. No, the hadith doesn't say that. And you're supposed to go to the Qur'an first for knowledge. The Qur'an comes first. And when you study the subject of Gog and Magog in the Qur'an, only then you go to the hadith. I have failed, and failed miserably. I can't get any prominent scholar of Islam anywhere on the face of the earth today to stand up and say, no, the explanation for the universal corruption in the world today is that Gog and Magog have been released. And they are responsible. They are responsible. I'm not going to lecture on Gog and Magog today. But Gog and Magog, from the Qur'an, we can identify them. Excuse me. We can identify them from the Qur'an. They are the ones who control power in modern Western civilization today. I have a book at the back entitled Islamic View of Gog and Magog in the Modern World. And so when we look for the corruption of money in the world today, the explanation for that money, corrupted money, lies directly here in the modern West. And it started with Britain. It started with the creation of the Bank of England, 1690 something, I believe. If you are a resident in Britain, don't waste your time. Study this subject. Study this country. If you are a resident here, study this country. There's much knowledge to be learned that will explain the world today if you study this country the way it ought to be studied, not the way they want you to study it. What Britain did was to turn away from the British pound, which was a gold coin. That's right. The British pound was a gold coin. And to gradually replace money with intrinsic value over a period of time, replace it with money with no intrinsic value. Once money has no intrinsic value, it's bogus. It's fraudulent. It's haram. There are those of you here who might be interested to now study international monetary economics. I studied it at 2 universities, but I came out of the classroom different from the monetary economists, the fellows who become governor of the central banks and usually end up working for the IMF. I came out of the classroom different from those fellows because I had the Qur'an with me. I could recognize that if you print paper and you print a number on that paper and then you assign to that paper a fictitious value, and then you recognize it as legal tender, then that's fraudulent. You should go to jail for that. Because you're creating wealth out of nothing. And then you take that pile of paper, that's all it is, paper, and you buy all the oil that Saudi Arabia is selling. You're getting it free of charge. If you can understand it, how come the fellows in the central banks don't understand it? How come the politicians don't understand it? That they're actually ripping you off. And then when we say, well, if you could make money out of nothing, well, why don't we also do it? So Pakistan says goodbye to the Qur'an. Yes, goodbye to the Qur'an. And we also now will print paper and put a figure. And when I arrived in Pakistan as a student in 1964, Pakistan was just 17 years old at that time. And $1 US was valued at 1 rupee and 75 paisas. And when I had to take the bus from Paposh Nagar to Sadar, because you can't afford to travel by taxi, not you're a student, you couldn't even afford a rickshaw. The price of the ticket by bus, they call it chawanni. Chawanni means 4 anna. Chawanni. And I think it was 16 to make 1 rupee, 4 anna. And if you want to go and come back, it's a tanni, 8 anna, half a rupee. Okay? And you wanted to buy a kilo of mangoes. You know Pakistan has the best mangoes in the world. So a student wanted to taste the Pakistani mango. And you could buy 1 kilo of very nice mangoes for 1 rupee, 1 rupee 50, 1.5 rupee. And I went back to Pakistan last year, and a kilogram of, now they call it VIP mangoes, 150 rupees. Huh? But when you're traveling now, you need to keep some money with you when you're traveling. You can't keep Pakistani rupees. You can't keep Bangladeshi taka. You have to keep their money. You have to travel with US dollars. or euros, or British pounds. And of course the Singapore dollar is still holding its weight. So they have something called hard currency. It's not just that they're ripping you off by printing paper and using it as money and buying whatever on free of charge, but they are perpetuating the rip-off, making it a permanent system by ensuring that their money becomes the money of trade, the money of travel. You can go to Lower Manhattan with a suitcase filled with rupees, Pakistani rupees, you can't buy a cup of coffee because nobody will accept it. I was in a conference in Brunei with many very distinguished scholars of Islam present, and I got only 15 minutes because I was a small man compared to these great scholars. So I said, let me tell them a joke. And when you tell a joke, you expect people to laugh. And if nobody laughs, terrible, eh? I tell a joke and nobody laughs. So I said, I have to explain this to you, why it is they have hard currency and we don't. I said, they have a secret solution, and they dip the money in that solution, and it becomes hard currency. We don't have this solution. That's why we don't have hard currency. Nobody laughed. Nobody laughed because they believe they believe this was correct what I was saying. This is the pathetic truth of our scholars. You cannot find any mufti anywhere who will declare that this money we are using is bogus and fraudulent and therefore haram. I met with Qazi Hosein Ahmad. I don't know if he's still alive, maybe he's passed away now. He was the head of the Jamaat Islami. And we had a session in probably Rawalpindi, and it lasted for more than an hour. And because I had studied monetary economics in 2 universities and studied the Qur'an, I could explain the subject to him. When I was finished, Qazi Hosein Ahmad stood up from his chair with indignation, and he stamped his foot. He said, "Ye to dhoka hai," meaning this is bogus, this money. This is the head of Jamaat Islami, and this is 20-something years ago. I said, well then, Qazi Sahib, it's haram. No, we can't say it's haram. He just said, ye to dhoka hai. This is bogus. But I cannot say it's haram. Only Mufti can do that. Mufti Azam. And this is Jamaat Islami, which is not your ordinary scholars. These are people who are studying the Quran. Maulana Abul Ala Maududi made a tafsir of the Quran. And these are people who have dedication to their Jamaat. And yet, I can't say it's haram. I have to mention Dr. Israr Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on his soul, who was a different kind of scholar. And he has fearlessness in him. He also recognized the money to be bogus. But he said it openly, I cannot say it is haram. Only Mufti can do that. That's what he said to me. And so we have to now end this subject of the corruption of money by saying the biggest failure of all is not the politicians. No. The biggest failure of all is not the governors of the central banks and the monetary economists. No. The biggest failure of all is the scholars of Islam. They are the ones who have led us to where we are today. Well then, before we end, what do we do? Have you read John Perkins' book as yet? Confessions of an Economic Hitman? If you have not, please read it. They have not introduced this bogus system of money. Unwitted the banking system, which I don't have the time to explain today. They've not done this simply to become rich. So the wealth of the world is over here. And now this is heaven. Who wants to go back to hell? Who wants to go back to hell? Over there is only poverty and destitution. It's not just to rip us off, and like a vacuum suction pump, suck the wealth of the world and bring it here, and leave the rest of the world miserably poor. They've done more than that. John Perkins has explained in this book that when they lend you money on interest, they calculate how much you can borrow. They calculate what is your capacity to pay back. And they ensure that they lend you more than you have the capacity to repay. Because they want to enslave you. And that's where Pakistan is today. If you default on your payments, every month you've got to pay the interest and the sum of the capital. If you default, your money will immediately collapse. The day Pakistan defaults, say goodbye. The rupee will be 1,000 rupees to $1 US. And then the masses will rise up and there'll be civil war and all kind of thing. What do we do? Do we remain in slavery? Or do we seek to recover our freedom? Pakistan is now the laughing stock of the world. They have to go begging and begging and begging, and Modi is laughing his head off. Bangladesh in a terrible state, Indonesia in a terrible state, Algeria and Morocco in a terrible state, all over the world of Islam. The Turkish lira is under attack. So what is the way forward? They have calculated very carefully to ensure you cannot get out of slavery. Hugo Chavez, who is my next door neighbor. I'm from Trinidad and Hugo Chavez is from Venezuela. Hugo Chavez recognized that the IMF was the cause of Venezuela's poverty. And he attempted to take Venezuela out of the IMF. And he failed, because they already put all the rope. They had put all the rope in place that you cannot escape. And so Venezuela could not get out of the IMF. The Venezuelan bolivar today are stacked this high for 100 US, this high of money. This is my response, and with this I will end. The way forward. And I gave this response in a lecture in Pakistan 25 years ago. But nobody listening. I said the way forward is to go to the Qur'an and to go to the scriptures before the Qur'an for guidance. And what we get from the Qur'an and the scriptures which came before the Qur'an is that the moral law is the highest law. That Allah created the heavens and the earth with haqq, with truth. Listen to the ayah in Surah Al-Jathiyah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وخلق الله السماوات والأرض بالحق. That Allah created the heavens, and the heavens is not the best translation, but allow me. Allah created the heavens and the earth with al-haq, truth. And He said more than that. وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. In order that each may receive the recompense of that which it has earned, and none shall be wronged in any way. This universe is a moral order because it is created with truth. And truth must prevail. Not the IMF. Truth must prevail. Let me quote one more verse of the Qur'an from Surah Al-Mujadilah. كتب الله لأغلبن أنا ورسلي إن الله قوي عزيز. I am proclaiming this. It is established that I will prevail and my prophets will prevail. The IMF could do what they want. And Allah is powerful. Allah is almighty. And so it is to the truth in the Qur'an that we must turn to find the way forward. And we begin by declaring the moral law is the highest law. I find South America producing people who could understand this truth in the Qur'an better than us. Hugo Chavez, Evo Morales, the new president in Brazil. South America is producing people who can think, while our people eat biryani and go home and sleep. I'm not speaking bad of biryani. I like biryani. My view is, since the moral law is the highest law, the monetary system today is oppression, and therefore we unilaterally reject paying any more interest on any loan, on the grounds that this is oppression and the moral law is the highest law. Number two, and I'm not the first to be saying this, Alan Garcia in Peru, I don't know, 20 years ago, Alan Garcia gave the same views. Number two, we will not pay any more interest, but we will pay the capital sum that is borrowed, because Allah has ordered that in the Qur'an. But Alan Garcia said, we will pay the capital sum based on our capacity to pay. So we have to see what kind of income we're getting from trade. So from the basis of income, we'll be able to pay a percentage of that. So if you want to squeeze us and put sanctions on us, less money coming, less money for you. So number one, a unilateral rejection or repudiation of paying any more interest on loans. Number two, that we'll repay the capital sum, but will be repaid based on our capacity to repay. This is the way forward. No politician will do this. None, including Imran Khan in Pakistan. No politician will do it. It is when the people rise up and the people force the governments, only then this will happen. South America is different. From the time you make this declaration, you're not paying any interest anymore, and you will pay the capital sum based on your capacity to pay. From the time you make this declaration, your money is going to start collapsing. So you have to have something to replace it. And therefore you cannot move forward unless and until you declare dinar and dirham to be legal tender. Once you declare dinar and dirham to be legal tender, it means that every laborer, whether you're in Algeria or Morocco or Bangladesh or Indonesia or Pakistan, every laborer now has the right to demand that his wage be paid in dinar and dirham. And from the time that is taking place, no longer will you suffer with your wages losing value. Yesterday you could buy a camel, today you could buy a donkey, tomorrow you could buy a goat, and tomorrow after that only a chicken. If you are being paid your wage in dinar and dirham, it will store its value. Where will we get the money from, the dinar and dirham? The answer is, once there is a demand in the market for dinar and dirham, that's what business is about. The businessmen will rush to get the dinar and dirham into the market, to be the first, to be able to cash in. So that's not a problem for the government. The problem is to declare dinar and dirham to be legal tender. Is it possible to do that? Can you declare gold and silver to be legal tender? Answer: you can't do it so long as you are a member state of the International Monetary Fund. Because the International Monetary Fund, the Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund prohibit the use of gold as money. Why have they done that? Because the day you bring gold and silver into the market as money, the bogus US dollar will collapse. That's why. So if we are to move forward, the first step in moving forward is that you must make dinar and dirham legal tender. Only then you can proceed to the next step and have adequate amount of dinar and dirham in the market. And then you can declare, we're not paying any more interest anymore. And we repay the capital sum borrowed, but only on the basis of our capacity to repay. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Splendid job, alhamdulillah. But how do we wake up this ummah? We have the means of media today, they are listening to your lectures. What would you say our future is? That's my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have long studied this subject. Even my dearest friends who are scholars of Islam, and I recognize them to be more learned than I am. I can't convince them. Yeah, these are people who love me. I love them. I can't convince them. I have come to the conclusion that you cannot succeed in changing the contemporary world of Islamic scholarship. My teacher tried before me and he failed. And I have tried these last 25 years or more and I have failed. And so I've come to the conclusion that we have to bring into being a new generation of scholars of Islam. And the internet has come at just precisely this time. The internet has come to help us. Because around the world they are closing the doors of the masjid on me. And when I try to rent a hall, then they get to work to try to get the hall cancelled as well. Yeah. They're doing everything because they feel that I pose a threat to them, a threat to their house of scholarship. It's collapsing. But I am happy, alhamdulillah, I'm happy that I already have students, and not just male, female as well. There are some of the sisters who are attached to me who are absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That the evidence is already there, that we are already moving in that direction and we're making progress. I'm fond of using this Arab proverb, al-kafilatu tasir. Kafila means the caravan, kafila. Al-kafilatu tasir. The caravan keeps on moving. Wal-kilabu tanbah. Even though the dogs keep on barking. So they have not been successful in blocking us. Allah has been kind, and maybe 5 years from now, I may not be still here in the world, you see them emerging. And there will be glittering scholarship, yes. They will be able, do a better job that I am doing in monetary economics. I have not, by all means, exhausted the subject today. There are many parts of the subject I have not touched on it today. So this is my answer to you. I make dua for that new generation of scholars who are coming. Our Prophet said, Allah's blessing be upon him, he said, my ummah is like the rain. I do not know, or rather it is not known which shower is better, the first or the last. That first shower of rain, the companions of the Prophet, they were shining stars. They were luminous. We are like candles, little sparks compared to them, to what they were. But he says that in the last shower is such that I don't know which one is better, the first or the last. So keep hope in your hearts that we'll have a generation of scholars coming in the future. And this is my lecture in Birmingham, in Edinburgh, which will be on Jummah, inshallah, on the new model of scholarship for Akhir Zaman. Okay, now we have a lot of questions here. How much time we have for Maghrib?
We have half an hour.
We have half an hour, okay.
Would you like to read them? Would you like me to read the questions for you, Imran?
Since this money is haram, what about the status of our zakat? If you can give your zakat in rice and flour, if you can give your zakat in sugar, okay, you're safer. If you can give your zakat in dinar and dirham. If you give your zakat in paper money and the paper is haram, you're not sure. They're not sure. What should the individual do in responding to inflation? We talked about the state and the community, but this person is asking about the individual. Number one, you should keep some of your wealth in dinar and dirham. Store it in dinar and dirham, okay? If you don't know how to buy gold and silver, just go to the jeweler the jewelry shop, and they'll help you. Number 2, the Prophet said, if you have land, hold on to your land. If you have animals, hold on to your animals. This is not the country to invest your money. Not this country. Because if you study Islamic eschatology, Britain is doomed. Britain will not survive. Okay? Go out there, which they look at as hell, and there buy land. Buy land, because land will keep its value. Buy animals, because animals will keep its value. Store some food in your house which is non-perishable food. I have a student in France, and I went to his home, and I said to myself, my gosh, he's done better than the teacher. He has everything stored in his house, non-perishable food. In your opinion, where in the world today is the best conception of money? But wait a minute. Didn't Zimbabwe do it recently? Didn't Zimbabwe declare gold and silver to be legal tender? That's right. We've been telling Zimbabwe to do this for a long time now. We're disappointed it took so long. But just what I've been asking our people to do, Zimbabwe did it. You could go to Zimbabwe today and you could buy gold and silver and you could use it as money. I went to Iran and I found only 2 ayatollahs, only 2, who agreed with me. The money is bogus and haram. I also found ayatollahs who reminded me of the Shah. They looked and behaved like emperors, and they had no knowledge at all of the subject. And they are ayatollahs. But I found the Iranian people had a quick understanding of the subject, like the Pakistani people. But they said to me, Sheikh, you have to go to the Rahbar, meaning the Ayatollah Khamenei, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. He's called the supreme leader, the Rahbar. You have to go to him, and if you can convince him, then tomorrow this country will change. He will declare the money to be haram. I said to them, I will do no such thing. I will do no such thing. Allah says in the Qur'an, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change the condition of a people. 40 years after you had your Islamic revolution, and your money is still bogus in Iran, and you say you're an Islamic revolution. Allah will not change your condition. No, until you take the initiative, using the guidance that He sent in the Qur'an to change your own condition. So Iran has to change their own condition. I'm not going there to do that. And similar with Pakistan. I spoke to Qazi Hosein Ahmad. No, I can't say it's haram. Only Mufti can do that. So wait until your Mufti Azam or whatever they call, wait until they give the declaration that the paper is haram. The individual can seek to escape from this fraudulent system by not keeping your wealth in paper money and not keeping it in the bank. Take your money that you have and invest it in that which has intrinsic value. I've already answered that for you. I don't have the time to deal with the Bilal and the dates hadith, which an interesting subject, will take too much time. If we leave the IMF, should we also leave the United Nations? If so, does that not give up a world stage and send up the message, especially large ones like leaving the IMF? Only one Muslim leader did the right thing. He took his country out of the UN, and he took his country out of the IMF, and then the CIA came after him, and they removed him. Who was that? Huh? You don't know? I'm only hearing whispers. Why don't you speak? You're only whispering. You're not too sure. It was Ahmad Sukarno. He took Indonesia out of the UN, and he did the right thing. And he took Indonesia out of the IMF, and he did the right thing. Why was it the right thing? Have you ever studied the Charter of the United Nations? Have you ever done it? I was a student of international relations. I had to study the Charter of the UN. There's a conflict between the Charter of the United Nations and the Quran. That's right, there's a conflict. You go and study it yourself and you'll see. Supreme authority lies with Allah, not with the Security Council. Supreme authority lies with Allah, not the Security Council. But if the Security Council tells you, stop fighting, you got to stop. Allah says, no, keep on fighting, but the Security Council says, stop. You have to stop, because supreme authority now with the Security Council. Yes, if we leave the United Nations and we leave the IMF, we wouldn't have that world stage. But we'll be much more dangerous to them than if we are in. And they should be celebrating that we have left. But they won't be able to digest their biryani if we leave. They'll be worried. They'll be scared if we ever leave the United Nations or the IMF. They'll do everything they can possibly do to prevent us from leaving. How do we live in a world full of interest? Don't borrow money on interest. Kabhi nahi. Don't borrow money on interest to buy a house. Don't borrow money on interest to buy a car. I lived in the United States for 12 years. I went to 5 different universities. I'm a former Foreign Service officer of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country. And at the end of 12 years, the car I was driving was worth about $500. And a truck came a few days before my departure and hit the car. And the truck went off. And the cost of repairs will be more than the value of the car, so I had to junk the car. Yes. That's my example. I never bought a house on interest in the United States. I never bought a car on in interest. Yeah? Stop borrowing money on interest. Stop it. You borrow money on interest, you're putting a rope around your neck. Since we are using bogus money, haram money, and Allah made halal dinar and dirham, are this Islamic world making indirect shirk? Of course, we are living today in universal shirk. But our Prophet warned. He said it will be so difficult to recognize that shirk. Shirk means blasphemy, heresy and so on. As it would be to recognize a black ant on a black stone on a dark night. The only way you can see that ant on that stone on that night is if you have a torchlight. But for shirk, it's not a torchlight you need. It's nur in the heart. Nur in the heart. Will the IMF ask Pakistan to give up nuclear weapons for future loans? The IMF is not so stupid. No, they wouldn't ask Pakistan to do that, because Pakistan will never do that. No. I'm getting old. Is it too late to start buying gold and silver? No, it's not. No, it's not. Would you regard the dollar, when it was backed by gold until 1971, to be legal money? All right, you asked a question, it will take some time to answer, and we have little time left. What happened at Bretton Woods, and the IMF came out of Bretton Woods, was that they decided to dump the sterling pound as a universal currency and replace it with the US dollar. And so Pax Britannica had to step aside to be replaced by Pax Americana. The US dollar became the money of the universal currency, because number one, only the US dollar and no other currency was redeemable in gold. And they fixed the rate at $35 US for 1 ounce of gold. But you and I, using the US dollar, but we could not go to Uncle Sam with $35 and ask for 1 ounce of gold. We couldn't do that. Only a central bank could do it. So this is not halal. In order for it to be halal, if the US dollar was redeemable in gold for everybody, anybody could go and take $35 US and get an ounce of gold, then yes, it would have been halal. But it was not halal, because they denied this to people. And also, the government that dared to go to Uncle Sam to ask for the gold had to be a stupid government. Yes, because there are consequences. And it took one leader who had the courage that no leader in the world of Islam had, only one. What was his name? De Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle. That he stood up in the French National Assembly and declared that this monetary system was unjust, favoring the United States. And then France now decided We want to redeem US dollars for gold. And that led Richard Nixon in 1971 to say, we gave our word, but we're not going to keep our word. We gave our word, but we're not going to keep our word. See? And then this fig leaf that the US dollar had of being redeemable into gold was gone. And from Bretton Woods came every other currency in the world would have its value based not on gold, but on its conversion to the US dollar. What is the process of leaving the IMF? How easy it is? What are the consequences of leaving? I have not studied. I'm not studying. And they're probably manufacturing more and more rope every day to make it impossible for you to leave the IMF. You have to be someone who is studying this as a PhD student, okay? To find out over the years what and what they have done to try to make it impossible to leave the IMF. Every country has some monetary system. That's not true. There's only one monetary system now controlling the whole world. But that monetary system controlling the whole world is now under attack. And the attack is being led by China. It's called BRICS. BRICS. And in that attack with China, there is Russia, and there's India, and there's South Africa, and there's Brazil, these 5. But a number of other countries are now joining BRICS to offer to the world an alternative monetary system to the one that's now prevailing. How can we introduce a new currency that will be halal? You can have a system like checks, that I can write out a check provided that you can cash it. Okay? As an alternative to actually having the physical gold. You can do that. And this system operated for thousands of years. This is how international trade was taking place. People were shipping from India, shipping to Europe, and they didn't have to transport the gold and silver. No. Because you had a system of monetary changes that based on trust, okay? That the payment will be made over there, the goods are shipped from here, and then afterwards you can settle with the gold. So yes, this is possible, but there must be a law and someone to enforce the law. That if I write out a check for 1 million dinars and I take the goods, and when you try to cash the check you can't get the 1 million dinars, then I should be punished with deterrent punishment. There are 3 kinds of punishment. There's one punishment which is retributive. You did this to me, I do it to you. There's one kind of punishment which is reformatory. We are punishing you to try to correct you. But there's one form of punishment which is deterrent punishment. If you steal, we cut off your hand. That's not retributive. That's not reformatory. That is deterrent punishment. So with this system, if you have a check system, you have to have deterrent punishment. Who will enforce that deterrent punishment? And the fellas writing the checks are the same fellas who have to enforce the law. Yeah? They will not do that. Okay? That's the problem with the system. Yeah. I should be back in London, inshallah, before, a day or two before Chandra, the night when we look for the moon. Okay? And I'm going to be staying right here in Ilford. And my students and I are going to go look for the moon. Today people don't even know where to look for the moon. You have to look for the moon where the sun is setting, not where the sun is rising. All right? And it's not one person who has to go, several people have to go in different locations, all over Britain. Okay? So I'll come to be able to be part of that searching for the moon, and I will stay for the first week of Ramadan here in London. Can land be used as money? No, you can't transfer land. I want to buy a kilo of mangoes. How would I transfer land for a kilo of mangoes? Microtransactions, no. That's why in the Sunnah it has to be articles of food consumption which have a shelf life and which are in abundant supply in the market. In Cuba, you'd use sugar as money because Cuba is a massive producer of sugar. In Indonesia, you'd use rice as money. Not the rice with the paddy off, no, the paddy with the scale on, that one. In Pakistan has an abundance of wheat, abundance of rice. So Pakistan has no shortage of money. Is it time now for Salat?
5:27.
5 minutes, okay. Can cryptocurrency be based on value? Can cryptocurrency be legal tender? I don't know. How much weight? How much weight? If I put cryptocurrency on a scale, how much weight will it have? Can anyone help me? Have you ever weighed it? Why is my audience so quiet? Why is my audience so quiet? Have you ever put cryptocurrency on a scale to weigh it? Can I bury cryptocurrency in the ground? Does cryptocurrency have intrinsic value? But then, why ask this question? This question is about insurance, and I avoid insurance myself, except where the law required, like drive motor car insurance. But when I take a motor car insurance, I take the minimum. And I would prefer to see that we establish our own insurance company, but the insurance company should not be a commercial enterprise. No. Our insurance company will be a non-profit enterprise. It's not been operating for profit. So that when people have accidents in their cars and so on, we have a means whereby the problem can be resolved. Okay? But someone better, more learned than I am, will have to give a fatwa on insurance. Would declaring dinar and dirham as legal tender result in war but Israel has already done it. Dinar and dirham are legal tender already in several states of the United States. Dinar and dirham, meaning gold and silver, is legal tender in Zimbabwe. Huh? So wake up. The dollar is collapsing and the new monetary system is moving to cryptocurrency, blockchain. Can you elaborate? Yes. The reason why they have brought cryptocurrency, which is not under the control of the central banks, is because they want cryptocurrency to perform the destabilizing function that would facilitate the transition from the present monetary system to one universal currency for all of mankind, which will be under the control of the State of Israel. Okay? Okay, time for Salat. Well, we have to now postpone these questions. And I thank you for being such a patient audience. After the Salat, whatever copies of books you buy, I'm going to autograph every single one of them for you, inshallah. Okay?